I can't believe the Boston Bruins did this. Like, it just makes no sense. What's on, guys? Jay Hoyt back with you today. Welcome back to NHL 25. We're playing some online versus today using the Boston Bruins. And yes, as of Tuesday of this week, in the afternoon, the Boston Bruins announced that they fired their head coach, Jim Montgomery, after a relatively disappointing start to the year. But here's the hard part, right? They say it's a difficult decision. They say, a lot of things that we'll talk about here, upcoming. But I think this was not the right decision. And I kind of want to talk about exactly why. So, like I said, on Tuesday, they fired their coach. They named Joe Sacco as their interim head coach. So they started the season 8-9-3, and not really a terrible start. I mean, obviously, given the kind of expectations from the Boston Bruins and from this franchise, that you'd expect a lot more out of them, of course. But at the same time, they're, what is that, 8, 17, that's 20 games into the year, so they still have 62 games remaining, and coming off from the last couple of years, I don't understand this one. So I want to break this down just so you guys fully understand. So under Jim Montgomery's leadership, under the Boston Bruins banner, he went 120 wins, 41 losses, and 23 overtime losses for a points percentage of a .715, which is incredible, right? He, had some difficult times in Dallas, right? He self-admittedly, kind of mutually terminated his contract there. He had some off-ice struggles. He got better. He came back. When Bruce Cassidy was with the Boston Bruins for, I think it was like 6 or so years, that they wanted to, change after 6 years, right? They have been a while since they've won, the Stanley Cup, but they've been doing very well. They just haven't gotten to the last step. Of course, there's been some good teams in there, like, one of them. But either way, this one just doesn't make sense, right? So you have a very successful coach. You obviously have been doing very well given the Boston Bruins kind of track record here. And this is just something I don't understand. So in the last 2 years, just for context, so the first year that, Jim Montgomery was with, the Boston Bruins, let me just make sure I got the right dates here. So the start of 22-23 was when they hired him. So in that year, they had obviously full 82 games, 54-12, and where's the overtime losses? And 5. So 54-12-5. They did incredible. Their goal differential was incredible, 135 points. They lost in the quarterfinals. I don't remember who that was against offhand, but still, an incredible year. You bounce back to last year, where you have, slightly down, year, if you will, having 36 wins, 20 losses as well. I feel like these stats are not completely accurate here. Their record, I don't know why that website was set up so terribly, but the Boston Bruins went 65-12-5 in their first year under Jim Montgomery, right? 135 points, an incredible goal differential, 34-4-3 at home. Like, that's just incredible. A goal differential of 128. Ended the season on an 8-game win spree. So, like, that's just incredible. I don't have the postseason in front of me. But then last year, right, still 47-20-15, still made it to the playoffs, 109 points. Not as well as they did the year before, obviously, but also you had the Florida Panthers that kind of came in and did very well. Big upgrade and big bump for them. So you can't really be super upset about that. But then going into this year, as of right now, again, they're 20 games into the year. They have 19 points. They're 8-9-3. And their goal differential is not great, right? They're minus 21, so 48 goals for, 69 goals against, 3-game losing spree, losing to teams they shouldn't be. So I understand, like, something needed to change. I just don't think that changing the coach after 2 years of him is the right choice, right? He's obviously a very good coach. He's had a lot of success with the Dallas Stars. He's had a lot of success with the Boston Bruins. He's led them to some great things so far. That there was talks of it was his extension year or his last year of his contract. So there was talks of extension, right? Which is great, right? Obviously you did very well. You kind of earned it. I don't know if they couldn't come to terms or, whatever. But there was talks of extension, multiple offers on the table. Just nothing ended up, materializing yet. But then also, watching the press conference from Don Sweeney, and he was saying that they had a very rough training camp. They did not have a good one. Everything kind of felt stale. Everyone kind of rested on what they did in the last couple of years, where, yeah, we did very well and we'll just, do that again this year. But then they didn't really show a lot in the preseason. And also the whole Jeremy Swayman thing with, not signing an extension or not signing a contract this year, coming in late, as well as having some injuries. Pasternak, Marchand, I think maybe one or two other guys, all had injuries coming this year, off-season surgeries or whatever it may have been. So a lot of rough things that, some of it is understandable, some's not. Obviously, injuries happen, bumps and bruises happen, especially in the NHL where you're flying around and, laying the body on the line for these wins, that those things happen. But then you also look at a lot of their comments saying, well, we have a lot of guys very underperforming. Well, I wanted to take a look at that. So let's take a look at the forward group here. So you have Morgan Geekie, who I think is just a younger player, still trying to find his way. I'm not sure how he's doing. We'll check on his stats here in a minute. But then you have Zacha and Pasternak. Okay, I know Zacha was kind of their number one center last year. Marchand, Lindholm, and Brazeau. I'm not really sure who Brazeau is, but obviously Lindholm and Marchand, very good players in their own right, as much as I hate to give Marchand any credit. So you have kind of two duos here. Okay, not bad. Then you have Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederick, two kind of third liners, could bump up, play a role type, on the, first line left wing, second line right wing type role. But in this case, they're on the third line. Another player that I have literally never heard of in Georgi Merkelev, as well as your fourth line of John Beecher, who I know is a younger player, still figuring it out. Mark Kastelik, who I'm not very familiar with. I've heard of his name a couple times, as well as Cole Kokeby. I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but a lot of players I've never heard of and I'm not very familiar with. So when you have kind of three duos that you're trying to figure it out, then okay, but that's not a lot. So let's take a look down here at the defense. So you have Mason Lohrei, you have Charlie McAvoy, obviously one of your better, arguably your best defenseman. You have Parker Wotherspoon, as well as Brandon Carlo, Nikita Zadorov, and Andrew Peeke. Okay, I mean, didn't you sign Nikita Zadorov to a massive contract to be, one of your main guys? And yet, I mean, I don't know how accurate this lineup chart is, but if he is playing on your third line, that's a bit strange. Like, why would you, put him in that role? Andrew Peeke, I know he's been there. He's making a lot of money, too, for a third-line defenseman. Mason Lohrei, I think, is relatively young. Wotherspoon, I'm not really too familiar with him. And, of course, there are goaltenders that are Swayman and Korpisello, which are, if they're both on their game, that's a very solid duo. But just something is not working. So who is underperforming? Let's go take a look at the stats and kind of go from there. All right, I'm sorry about the white screen, but unfortunately, ESPN does not have dark mode. But when you look through this team, I see a lot of players doing a lot of nothing. And I don't want to say nothing, but there is a lot of players here that are not doing much of anything. So Pasternak being their number one guy, being their superstar player, 17 points in 20 games. not terrible, but obviously he's capable of a lot more. Brad Marchand, 13 points. Same thing, right? He needs to be a lot better than that. Lindholm, he signed a big contract. You expect him to come in and put up some good points. 9 points, not great, right? We need more from at least those three. Then we look down there, though, and Justin Brazeau, again, one of those players I'm not very familiar with, but he has 8 points, right? He's fourth on the team in points, or tied for fourth, I should say, along with Cole Kokby. Still don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's up there doing well for a couple players I've never heard of. Mark Kastelik, 7 points as well. So 3 players that, again, I've never really heard of as your top, or 3 of your top 6 players is already starting to beg the question of, like, where is the rest of your team here? Like, you can't just have random guys that are getting paid almost nothing, being the number one guys. Like, that just doesn't make sense. So we take a look down here, Charlie McAvoy, right? You're arguably your best defenseman, 7 points, right? Need more out of him. Hampus Lindholm, 7 points in 17 games. I mean, not awful, right? Not terrible. You're not like 2 points in -10, but still, those 2 guys are supposed to be big players for the Boston Bruins, both underperforming like crazy. I know Lindholm is injured. Not sure when he's coming back, but still need more from him, or more from them, I should say. Mason Leroy, 7 points from, I guess, Charlie McAvoy's D partner. I mean, fine, but still. Zacha, 7 points. Your number one center. Gotta be up there, right? You gotta be 10 plus points minimum right now. Like, even if the rest of the team's struggling, you gotta get up there. Trent Frederick, third line guy right now, -11, 6 points. Got to be better, right? It's plain and simple. John Beecher on the fourth line, 6 points, positive 2, 19 games. I mean, he's playing the fourth line, at least from the screen that we saw. Need more out of it. I don't want to say we need more out of him, but where's the entire team? The big guy, right? Nikita Zadorov, 20 points. 20 games played, 5 points, -1. But we take a look over here at that penalty minutes, 46 through those 20 games. So that's absolutely incredible. Also taking a look at 21 penalty minutes for Frederick. McAvoy's got 26. Kastelik's got 24. 18 you pair for the top 2 guys there as well. But then you look down, Charlie Coyle, your second or third line center, -10, 5 points. Need more from him. Morgan Geekie, he hasn't played all the games, but still, 4 points, 15 games. Not doing well. Matthew Potras, 14 points, 14 games, 4 points, not doing well. Carlo, he's a shutdown type guy, but still -5. You need him to actually shut people down. Andrew Peak on the fourth line, 2 points, -2. Obviously, you're not doing something right. And then we have a couple other guys here, with a couple games played, rotation guys, depth guys, whatever it may be. Not really doing too much of anything. Newly signed Tyler Johnson on there as well, 5 games played, so still very early on for him. And then Parker Wotherspoon, 10 points, -1. I mean, I don't really know what you're doing, but obviously we need more from you. Then we take a look at the goaltenders, right? We have Jeremy Swayman, Jonas Corposello, 14 games played for Jeremy Swayman, 5-7-2, 3.47 goals against, under a 900 save percentage. So, I mean, there's your big reason. Your starting goaltender's not performing, but also neither is your team. Corposello, at least somewhat positive here, 7 games played, 3-2-1, as well as a 2.7 goals against, just above a 900 save percentage. So, again, not great, but also this is more of a team struggle than anything. So if we're taking a look at this team, we see a lot of guys underperforming, right? Just plain and simple, a lot of guys underperforming. Now, like I said earlier, is the best solution to fire Jim Montgomery in this case? No, right? This is a personnel issue. I don't know what it is, but something is going on to make this team not play well at all. So then we take a look at kind of their salary, right? What could we possibly do? What moves could we possibly make to help out this team? And let's go over to, well, I guess it was cap friendly. Now it's a different site, and take a look at their salary caps. All right, so when we take a look at the salary and how long everyone is signed for, right, this is all of the NHL roster, right? So you have Pasternak and Lindholm signed long-term for both of them. Marchand's up this year. Then you have Charlie Coyle with another year on his contract before he's a free agent. You have Zaka in year 2 of his contract. You have Trent Frederick, who's going to be UFA after this year, $2.3 million. Morgan Geekie, $2 million for him. Is an RFA after this year. Don Beecher, Merkelev, Kastelik, all RFAs after this year. Then you have kind of a bunch of random guys down here. Justin Brazeau, Cole Kopech, Tyler Johnson, all UFAs after this year. All kind of guys that you wouldn't expect to be in your top, top 6 in scoring, but maybe that line's just fine right now. And then also you have Jeffrey Veal, who I don't think was in that lineup, so I don't really know how to place him, but he's got another year on his contract. So as far as your forwards go, you're other than your top 2 there, you don't have a lot of guys signed, for depth here or for years. So you have some flexibility there if you need it. But let's go take a look at the defense, right? So we look down there. We got Charlie McAvoy signed long-term. Hampus Lindholm signed long-term. Nikita Zadorov signed long-term. You have 2 more years of Brandon Carlo. You have another year of Andrew Peak. And then Mason Leroy, Patrick Witherspoon, both expiring this year. But, Leroy does have that RFA status. So as far as when I look at that, you have a solid top 4 if they learn how to play together, right? If you have like Zadorov and McAvoy on the first line, and then you have Lindholm and Carlo on the second line, assuming they can play well together, there's your top 4 instantly, right? And those guys are your top 4 defensemen. Then you have Andrew Peak. Then you could have Leroy down there, or Witherspoon, or Osterley, or whoever else is going to be there as your kind of rotation, third line defensive pair. Or if, one of those other match or lineups or those pairings doesn't work out, then you can kind of rotate some guys in there. But I don't know. Like you have some decent players, but also I feel like this is a forwards issue more than anything. But then looking down at goaltenders, obviously, like we've talked about, you have $11.25 million, tied up in just your goaltenders alone. So I just took a look back at why Korpisalo was signed to that contract, and I forgot about this trade where they acquired Korpisalo along with a first-round pick and Mark Kastelik from Ottawa in exchange for Linus Ullmark. I did forget about that trade, so I was wondering why he was signed to such a big contract. So there must have been some retained salary in there because he was signed to I think it was like 5 years, $5 million or something like that. So his cap hit is 3. So there must have been retained salary is what I'm guessing. But in this case, I really feel like the forwards are failing them, right? So you have Pasternak, you have Lindholm, you have Marchand, you have Zaka, right? And you have kind of like 4 players that are notable names, but nobody's performing, right? I feel like in the offseason, they got Elias Lindholm, which was a relatively big signing, but again, he's underperforming too. So Zadorov signed a big contract, 6 years, $5 million or something. So that's a big contract, but I feel like your forward depth isn't as good as they think it is. And I don't know how much salary cap I think they're relatively, can I see it on here? Yeah, they have no salary cap. So they would have to make some kind of salary move in order to kind of do anything with their roster, given what their current situation is. So you'd have to trade a little bit of salary in order to get anything right now. So in my opinion, now that you got Swayman signed and he's committed here, I would almost trade Korpisalo. Mainly because that salary of $3 million, you could easily get, I don't want to say easily, but you could probably get 1 or even 2 forwards and pay about the same, or maybe even just 1, depending on where they come from, to get somebody that would help, because having 2 goaltenders that are underperforming doesn't help. So that could be an option. I would probably suggest an Andrew Peak trade, because having 5 defensemen all above $2.75 million is insane to me. right? Usually you never have that. So with everyone else up here, signed pretty long term, and Carlo having 3 years left at $4.1 million, I feel like that could be helpful, because the other reason is you have drafted terribly, right? I know I saw a TikTok that said back to, what year was it? Was it 2017? And the main reason I say that goes back to the 2015 draft. And I was trying to figure out the year because I knew what the situation was here. But you take a look at the possible draft picks they could have had, and they drafted Jacob Zaboral, Jake DeBrusk, and Zach Session. I don't really know how to pronounce his name. But DeBrusk ended up turning up into a pretty good player for you. And Zaboral you traded away in I think it was the Andrew Peak trade. But you look down this first round, and players that you would have rather had than, at least two of those guys being Matthew Barzal, Kyle Connor, Tomas Chabot. And then you look down at Joel Eriksson Ek, Brock Besser, Travis Konechny. Who else do you got? There's a couple more. Sebastian Aho, there's Brandon Carlo for you. And then there was another couple ones in this second round that I'm forgetting. Rope Hentz. Right, so you did not a great job in drafting. And I'm not just using this one example and saying, badly, because without going back to look, then I don't really know all of their draft picks offhand. But when we take a look back at their drafts, you look back in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years that I can fit on the screen, 3 of those players are or only have played for your NHL team. Now, obviously, I don't know a lot of these players. If I could name where they're playing right now, I know a couple of them that I recognize that I've seen on their Providence team. But when you look back, right, there is not a lot of players that have played for them. And even then, not a lot of them have turned into anything, right? Because you look at Jacob Lacko, hadn't really played much. Studnicka didn't really turn out. He didn't turn out. Obviously, you have Swayman still. Then you go back to McAvoy. You have Trent Frederick, Ryan Lindgren, no longer with the team. You look down, nobody. Jake DeBrusk, okay, here's that draft, right? Where Zaboral, 4 seasons, 16 points, 76 games, nothing. Then you have Jake DeBrusk in there that, was a big player for you for a while. Zach Session hadn't really ever turned out in anything. Brandon Carlo, go down. None of these players really did much of anything for you. Look back even here, you had Pasternak, Donato, Heinen, and then even Andres Bjork, who was a depth guy, but still did very well. And even back to 2013, you still had nobody in this entire draft. You go back to the year before that, you have Matt Grzelcyk, and I guess you could say Matt Benning, but still not great. Go back to 2011, Dougie Hamilton is the only player in there that did anything. And you keep going back and back and back. Not a lot of these players turn into anything for them. So I'm not just saying, you didn't draft well, you didn't do this well, or whatever. But you got to do something different here. I'm not saying fire everybody, start completely, factory reset this, but, this definitely is part of it. So yes, I'm not an expert on the Boston Bruins, but just from the outside looking in, looking at this team, you're missing a lot. And you had a really good coach, and I'm not saying Joe Sacco won't be a good coach, but at the same time, I don't believe that was the problem, and I think they definitely should have made other moves than just a coach. Right? I think there's a lot more important things to do than firing Jim Montgomery. But either way, guys, I hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure to hit the like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, guys, we'll see you in the next one.